Welcome to Hot Bike with Houston and Hogan. I'm Randy Houston, and you are?
And from Hogan Holler, Dave Hogan here.
Well, we're two old radio guys telling the radio stories. We've both been on the air around the hollers and the glades and the coves of western North Carolina and East Tennessee for more years than we either one want to think about. And we decided to do a podcast and tell some radio stories, and we've had such a good time, Dave, doing that. But today is a continuation of a special guest.
Tammy Rogers King is our special guest today. And Tammy is one of the founding members of the band, the SteelDrivers. And I have a question for you, Tammy, and one for Randy also. Randy is still active as a DJ, and I'm retired. I hear people say, well, the SteelDrivers, they're not really bluegrass. I hear people say, Chris Stapleton is not really country. Now, I mentioned on the first podcast that we did with you, Tammy, that I have a cousin who is a banjo player and plays for the Grascals. Now, they play a completely different type of bluegrass than the SteelDrivers. So let's talk a little bit about that umbrella of bluegrass music. And in that, under that umbrella, bluegrass has grown to the point there are different types of bluegrass. Expound on that a little bit. You, Randy, as a DJ, and Tammy, you as an artist.
Tammy, go ahead. But I'm glad you brought that up, Dave. You put that so eloquently. And Tammy, let's talk about it. How you guys feel about the different strains of bluegrass, if you will?
Well, I absolutely agree with that statement that there are. I think bluegrass has, it's a much larger umbrella these days than it was, when Bill Monroe started the music. And I think that that's been a good thing because, Bill was able to create a sound that was unique to him. And if every other band was expected to sound exactly like him, there's no way that the music would have stayed as vital and fresh as it has through almost 80 years now. You can't just keep copying over and over and over and over again and keep people's interest, I don't think. So, the fact that you're allowed to have a unique expression and still be under the umbrella is great. Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs, you put on one of those records and you know immediately who it is. You fast forward to the Stanley Brothers in the 60s and you know exactly who that is. You fast forward to the 70s with J.D. Crowe and you know who that is. So I think that's really, as an artist, to me, that's the goal. To have a unique and identifiable sound. And, it's hard to do. I'm not saying that it's an easy task, but when you are able to do that, then I think you've done something pretty special that people can really hear immediately and know, oh, that's the SteelDrivers. So, we set out to do something different. But we all grew up, with the exception of Stapleton. He didn't necessarily grow up playing bluegrass specifically. He grew up in East Kentucky, of course, but I think he listened to all kinds of different music. But the rest of us, were very well versed in bluegrass. But like I said, in, the first show, the volume 1, by the time we got the SteelDrivers together, it had been about 15 years before I had really played any traditional bluegrass. I had been out touring with country artists and doing recording sessions in Nashville and playing a lot of Americana music, just a lot of different styles of music. And I love that. I love all music. I love what Del McCurry said. There's two kinds of music, good and bad.
Well said.
Well, you talked about traveling with various artists. You spent a lot of time on the road with people like Patty Loveless and Trisha Yearwood and Reba McEntire. Yeah. Picked up a lot of stuff there, I'm sure.
And I loved that. I loved the fact that I was able to have, those experiences, because again, I got to sing and play with some of the icons of my generation.
Yeah.
And when I look back now, I have to pinch myself because, as a young person, I've said this before, I don't think I dreamed big enough, because if you'd asked me at 13, 14 years old if I would ever get to step on stage with Emmylou Harris or Reba McEntire or, Dolly Parton, any of these people, I would have thought, you're crazy. That's not going to happen, So the sheer fact that those experiences plus many, many more came my way, I still can't get over it. So it's just been an unbelievable, magical gift to me that I've been able to meet and play and know these people. I just, can't explain it any other way.
Well, you've just outlined a whole lot of road travel, a whole lot of time spent on the road. Tell us about that life. Raising a family and then being on the road as much as you are. You still are on the road a lot.
I am. The SteelDrivers, which has been my main gig since about 2009. I kept touring in the early days with the band. I kept touring with Reba until 2009. And by then the band, we'd already been nominated for a Grammy, and we were starting to get some really good, dates booked. And I couldn't keep juggling both. But, I tell you, it's not easy, and, it's not for the faint of heart. It takes a village, as they say, and definitely, being married to another professional musician, Jeff King, my husband, he's been, I've said this over and over and over again, I would have quit the band a dozen times if he weren't behind me saying, you can't quit, you love this too much.
Now, Jeff is an East Tennessee boy.
He is. He's from Townsend. Yep. And like
down
I said,
in the Smoky Mountains.
Mm-hmm. And we've been able somehow between the two of us to juggle incredible studio life and touring life. And we have one daughter that is 22 now. And, to her, this is normal, what mom and dad do.
Mm-hmm. How is Chris Stapleton handling superstardom?
I think he's stayed pretty grounded. Obviously we don't chat every day or even every week, but we stay in touch. And I did get to visit with him in person. Maybe it was back last fall. And when we do see each other, it's just like the same Chris that I've known now for, close to 20 years.
I would imagine that if not too long ago, Chris could walk around Nashville unrecognized, but he can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so. Although Nashville is, as far as that goes, there's so many artists that live here that most people pretty much leave them alone.
That's great. That's wonderful.
You'll see Vince Gill out at a restaurant or, somebody else. And I've seen Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman around Nashville, and people are very respectful here, which is why so many of them want to live here, I think.
I heard a funny story, and I don't know if I'm going to let you tell the story. I don't know if, how stories get exaggerated along the way, but I heard a story about your mom when she was living with you in Nashville, and she was a big fan of Larry Gatlin.
Oh, yes.
Do you know the story I'm talking about?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell that story.
Mom was visiting, and we had a different house than we're in now, but we had a home studio down in the basement. And Jeff was doing some work, some studio stuff with Larry Gatlin, and he would come in through the bottom of the house, and not to disturb what was going on upstairs. And he'd come over several times, and she had expressed to Jeff how much she loved Larry, and gosh, the next time that he came over, she would just love to meet him. And so sure enough, the next time he came over, Jeff brought him upstairs to meet my mom. And Larry is just the most, if you haven't met him, the most outgoing, friendly guy you would ever want to meet. And Jeff brought him upstairs to the kitchen, and my mom was standing there in her house coat.
And her hair in curlers.
I love it.
And she was obviously thrilled to death to get to meet Larry, and he just grabbed her and hugged her and, loved on her. And after, they went back downstairs, she was like, "I'm going to kill that Jeff King. He didn't take any notice, and here I'm standing in my old house coat."
I love story.
I've heard
she was
so
horrified,
many.
but it was a good story.
Good story. I've heard so many good things about Reba McEntire. Talk about your touring with Reba, and what kind of person is Reba McEntire?
Reba is incredible and has been so good to our family. I mean, Jeff still tours with her when she goes out. The way she appears on screen and in concert is exactly the way she is behind the scenes. Just wonderful. She's got a great sense of humor. She loves to laugh. As a matter of fact, our neighborhood here in Nashville, we really do up Halloween. And this past fall, she was in town, and she and her boyfriend Rex wanted to go to a neighborhood that had trick-or-treating. So they came over to our house, and she was kind of dressed up in costume, and we just sat there, and Rex gave out candy, and we had a little fire pit going in the front yard, and she just enjoyed herself so much. And then we started walking around the neighborhood and knocking on doors, and I don't think anybody realized that Reba McEntire was coming up to their door. But she just couldn't get over it. She just had such a good time. It was just really a fun night.
Another person I want to ask you about is Dean Miller, son of the late Roger Miller. And
yes.
back in the 1960s, when country music was just trying to regain its legs or grow new legs after it was almost destroyed by rock and roll, that's when I got into radio in the 1960s. And we used to have a disc jockey convention in Nashville. And at that time, DJs got together in October and were able to get to know and meet a lot of the artists of that era. And one of the artists, I can't say I was on a first name basis with Roger Miller, but I was able to get to know Roger. And he was a wild but wonderful person. Wild and wonderful is the way I would describe him. Back when they had the King of the Road Inn, where Ronnie Millsap got his start in Nashville. What kind of person is his son, Dean?
Dean is a wonderful talent, and he's done several records himself. Extremely kind. I just was always struck by his kindness, and, he was brought up by a superstar. I mean, Roger Miller in the 60s was not just a country star. He was a crossover superstar. So, he just always struck me as, being such a down-to-earth, normal person to have been brought up in that world. A great guy, really, really great. And now he's producing a lot of records. He stayed in Nashville and had a good songwriting career, and has kind of moved into producing, and he's doing great.
Well, Tammy, you've been so kind with your time. As we wrap up our second visit here, let's talk a little bit about what the future holds, what dates coming up, road trips, tours, what's coming up on the horizon here.
Well, we've got a nice year going for the SteelDrivers. We've got a big show. I'm not sure when this podcast will air, but May 16th, we're headlining the Ryman here in Nashville, which is always a big show for us. We love playing the Ryman. We love its history. The sound there is unlike any other place. It's just our favorite. And then, good amount of festivals scattered through the summer. And then as we move into the fall, we'll get into, back into doing theater shows and things like that. But next year, we're really looking towards a big 20th anniversary tour. That'll be the 20th anniversary of the founding of the SteelDrivers. So we're super excited for that and see how that all comes together for us.
And you'll be in Western North Carolina later in the year in Tryon.
Yes.
Oh,
For
really?
the Earl Scruggs event.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
We haven't played that one before, so I'm very excited to get over there. And I'm always excited to get to Western Carolina because I usually get to see my dear cousins Margot and Lita.
Yes. Yeah. We'll come down
I love
to
them so dearly, and the guys know Lita because she usually treats them to home-baked goodies. So they're always excited to get either some pound cake or some brownies or whatever she feels like making. And we're also going to be back to the Bristol Rhythm and Roots this fall, which is always a big show for us up there. So a lot of good things in the next little bit.
Well, speaking of Tryon, and Randy and I just recently went down to the
Equestrian Center there in Tryon.
Yeah, and that's where the Earl Scruggs show will be in memory of the late Earl Scruggs. But it brings up in my mind the fact that you Rogerses, is that the way you say Rogers plural?
Rogers,
Yes.
yeah.
You Rogerses are all horse people, it seems.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Tammy. Dave, like I said, he's always told me about Tammy Rogers, and one of these days we're going to call Tammy, and I kept, yeah. One of these days. Well, we've done it, and I can't wait to meet you in the fall in Tryon. We'll be there looking
Fantastic.
we want to meet and say howdy, and we want to thank you again so much for being a part of our Hot Mic with Houston and Hogan.
Thank you, Tammy.
My
We appreciate
pleasure,
it so
guys.
much.
Thank you so
You guys
much.
have a good day. All righty.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Be sure to click the subscribe button for another episode of Hot Mic with Randy Houston and Dave Hogan.